26th of June 2026, Lebanon, Israel, and the United States signed a framework to end the war in Lebanon. That day, Lebanon recognized the state of Israel, in full and unconditional. In return, it received a promise of withdrawal, with a strict mechanism but no date, tied to a disarmament that Lebanese state cannot carry out, and that Israel will verify. But within 48 hours, the fight was no longer with Israel. It had moved inside Lebanon. Three questions decide what this document is. What does it actually do? Can the parties deliver it? And what is most likely to happen next? Let's start with what was signed. At the center of it stands the first of the 14 points. It grants a mutual right to exist in peace. That is recognition, and it is immediate and unconditioned. Almost everything Lebanon would gain runs the other way. Withdrawal, reconstruction, and the return of the displaced are all gated on a verified disarmament, and Israel decides when that is done. A confidential security annex, kept from the public at Lebanon's own request, details Israeli control over the operational details. Now let's look at what the text really does. 77 years of conflict over occupation, borders, prisoners, and violations of Lebanese air and water. All of it recast as a singular issue, the arms of one Lebanese party. Except that, and every prior reference that once bound Israel falls away. The UN resolutions, the armistice, the Arab Peace Initiative, and the obligations pile up on one side. Read the 14 points in order, and Lebanon carries about 11 separate duties, and Israel carries none. Israel's one line says it has no territorial ambitions in Lebanon, with no verification. 11 to 0. But the government's case is real, and it's worth stating plainly. This is the first accord with Israel since 1983. It names peace as the goal. It paces any pullback to steps Lebanon takes. So on paper, Lebanon holds a lever. It comes with money, and the leadership took a genuine risk to sign it. But that case also has one weak link: the claim that there's no alternative. Alternatives existed. It is armament worked out at home on the TAI formula, signing nothing binding and fighting the sequencing through Lebanon's own institutions, the model that settled the seaboard in 2022, done indirectly, with no recognition attached. These terms were not taken on the battlefield. They were conceded at a table, and recognition was handed over first and unpriced. There was a choice, which raises the first real question: is any of it even legal?
One text left Washington on the 26th of June, and within a week it existed in 4 different readings. The government called it a political framework with no legal consequences. The opposition called it a surrender, born dead. Israel called it an achievement, precisely because it commits no one to withdraw. And then there is the reading of the law itself, the one that decides what this document can and cannot do. The name on the document does not decide whether it binds you. Under the law of treaties, intent and content do. And this text postpones both. It carries its binding instrument off to a comprehensive treaty promised later. And in the meantime, it mixes the language of commitment with the language of hope. Some lines say Lebanon shall, others say the parties aspire. So it binds Lebanon politically, not legally. That saves the government's argument and empties it at once. Nothing durable was actually concluded. At the same time, it is not the current framework agreement that recognizes Israel legally. The 2022 Lebanon-Israel Maritime Border Agreement did it before. Lebanon refused to recognize Israel politically, but its approval on the document did it legally. The framework agreement inverted the equation. It brings it a step further by formally recognizing Israel politically, but without the legal backing it needs. Now, walk it through the Constitution. Under Article 52, an ambassador's signature does not conclude a treaty. It certifies the text. Conclusion needs the President, the Prime Minister, and the Council of Ministers, and anything financial needs Parliament on top. Then comes the war. Article 65 requires a two-thirds majority in cabinet for war, peace, and treaties. Amal and Hezbollah together hold more than a third of that room. They hold a veto. And the Speaker, who decides when Parliament sits, has already said the text will not be implemented. That is a second lock, in a different hand. Two more defects. The Constitution makes the President the guardian of the country's territorial integrity. This text turns sovereignty into a reward, handed back in stages if performance is judged good enough. And the instrument exists in 3 English originals with no authenticated Arabic text at all. That is a live formal defect in the thing itself. The deeper collision is with Ta'if, the agreement that ended the civil war. Ta'if points disarmament inward. Giving up weapons is a debt owed to the Lebanese state. And Ta'if caps the relationship with Israel at the 1949 armistice. Security without recognition and without peace. This framework reverses both. It turns disarmament into a service owed to Israel and verified by Israel, and it lifts the ceiling all the way to full peace. It also drops the one position Lebanon helped author. The Arab Peace Initiative, adopted in Beirut in 2002, priced recognition against a full Israeli withdrawal. This text inversed the price. Full recognition first, withdrawal deferred. And the public did not follow it there. As what should anchor a deal, they still put that initiative first. One clause deserves its own moment. Paragraph 13 asks Lebanon to stop pursuing Israel in international political and legal fora. Read plainly, that signs away Lebanon's last card that it's not a weapon. The standing at the courts, the complaint to the Security Council, the access to the human rights bodies. However, the Prime Minister and President say that it's simply an act of good faith for the time of the negotiations. The clause doesn't give up the only legal weapon that Lebanon has, yet. Those are the tools of the weaker party, and this line asks the weaker party to set them down.
So where does the law leave it? Lebanon has been here once before. The 17th of May Accord of 1983 actually passed parliament. The president then refused to sign the decree, and it was dead inside 10 months. That deal traveled further down the same road than the framework has, and it still collapsed. That leaves 3 ways out. Clean acceptance, which the blocking third and the speaker make close to impossible. Clean rejection, which is available but costs Lebanon the withdrawal and the reconstruction it was promised. And amendment, the likeliest. Treat a thing as the non-binding political document the law already says it is, and reopen the sequencing and the verification through its own working groups, before any of it turns into a treaty. The law says it cannot bind on its own. The ground says it cannot run at all. Disarmament is not a new task for the army. It was handed this job back in 2025. It drew up a phased plan with no timetable, and the deadline lapsed. The framework just adds an outside verifier, and then adversaries sign off onto a machine that had already stalled. And look at the sequence. Disarmament has to be verified before Israel redeploys. But the army cannot safely clear or hold a zone where Israel keeps the freedom to strike it. Step 1 needs Hezbollah's cooperation. Step 3 needs Israel's withdrawal. Each is chained to each other. Then there's the verifier. The text calls for a mutually agreed third party and never names one. So the role drifts to Washington, which is also the broker and the party arming one side, not a neutral check. So the deal cannot run. And the tensions around it returned home. Within 48 hours of the signing, the president and the prime minister owned the text they signed. Parliament Speaker Nabi Berri called it worse than the 1983 surrender, stopped speaking to the presidency, and began floating a counter deal of his own. Hezbollah called it void, but declined to rupture. And this is the part to get right. It is not a sectarian problem. The opposition reaches past the Shia parties, into Sunni religious bodies, and into the Druze center, where Jumblat calls the whole thing dictated by Israel. A demand to disarm one party is turning into a loyalty test of the whole community, and the charge of treason now flies in both directions. Consent. A national poll before the signing found that half the country will take an end to the war, but fewer than a third will take a relationship with Israel. Nearly 3/4 wanted the state to keep the weapons and train the army on them. And asked what actually brings stability, Lebanese put a full Israeli withdrawal first, and disbanding Hezbollah dead last. The deal signs Lebanon up for that ranking turned upside down. The ceiling on all of this is set outside the country. The guarantor is not one actor. The Rubio line wants Hezbollah disarmed and Tehran shut out of the file. The Vance line wants to protect a separate US-Iran understanding that called for a full ceasefire. So the party grading Lebanon's performance is divided against itself. And it is also the party arming one side. There is a rival way out. Egypt, Qatar, and Turkey, with Saudi money behind them, are pushing a consensual disarmament. The weapons folded into the state rather than destroyed on an adversary's eye. with Damascus offering cover. On paper, it is the better road, and it is the version the public preferred. But it only works if several of these channels fire at once. Any one of them moving alone changes nothing. And step back, because the shape of this deal is not new. Framework agreements come in two kinds. One puts a real deadline on the hard part, and it gets done. The other gates the hard part on open-ended performance and quietly buries it. Oslo, the 2003 roadmap, the Gaza ceasefires, all the burying kind. And Washington is running the same script in three places at once: Lebanon, Syria, and Gaza. So the stalemate coming is not a Lebanese accident. It is the template doing what the template does, which leaves one question. What happens next?
So, what happens next? Let me share 6 prospective scenarios ranked by likelihood over a 60 to 90-day horizon. They are not mutually exclusive and several may run at once. Let's start with the most likely, by a wide margin, the codified stalemate. The framework holds as signed, the pilot zones stall, no withdrawal timetable appears, the occupation hardens behind the belt, and the displacement settles towards permanence. Does that sound familiar? This follows the Gaza precedent. This path dominates for a simple reason. It requires no party to make major concessions, fits every actor's posture at once, and each of them can go on blaming the stall on someone else indefinitely. Now, for the lower likelihood path, first we have the internal rupture. The file is forced to a cabinet vote, fails the two-thirds threshold, and the contest climbs from a veto into a legitimacy crisis. The aggravators include the move against Army Commander Haikal, enforcement of the money clause against the depositor of the Al-Qad al-Hassan, or street friction meeting an overreaction. The third path is the hopeful one. Pressed by a regional demand and given cover by Damascus, Hezbollah agrees to a face-saving transfer of its arsenal to the army. But it is held down by the party tying any concession to a full Israeli withdrawal that Israel does not intend to give. Fourth scenario, Washington forces a confrontation. The harder line prevails, a compliance deadline gets tied to disarmament, and aid gets withheld, all of it pushing Lebanon toward a coercive move against Hezbollah that it simply cannot carry out. Fifth, the region absorbs the fight. The Doha, Egyptian, and Syrian channels converge, and the framework survives as a shell around a settlement negotiated elsewhere. And finally, the last path, the most costly one, is a reopening of the front before the framework can set, whether in the form of a break in the US Iran understanding, a major Israeli strike, or an escalation spiral. We've seen the likelihood of this path increase significantly in the past week. Every one of these rests on 3 assumptions, and each holds only until a specific event breaks it. First assumption, that the signed framework stays the governing text. That breaks on a front collapse. Second, that Israel keeps the belt and vacates at most the 2 pilot zones. That breaks the day Israel withdraws beyond them. And third assumption, that Hezbollah's rejection stays institutional, fought through the constitutional gates. That breaks on a minister resigning or a call for sustained street action. So watch the tails, monitors the indicators, an actual withdrawal from a pilot zone with the Lebanese army walking in, a cabinet vote that tests the two-thirds threshold, a Hezbollah minister resigning, a major street called out, a US compliance deadline, or regional initiative acquiring a real mechanism. Watch those tails, and you will know ahead of time which path is winning.
So strip it all back. Lebanon gave away the one thing it could not take back: recognition, and got a process in return. The withdrawal has no date, the machine cannot run, and the fight has moved home. This was never going to be peace, and is not quite war. It is the freeze in between. When this text calls itself irreversible, the honest answer is that irreversible is a wish, not a property. For the full assessment, visit our website.